Welcome to Just Thinking. The town election is on May 21st. To help you learn about the candidates, I will be interviewing each one that is running for a contested seat. I will ask the same questions of each candidate for an office so we can compare and draw our own conclusions from their responses. These interviews run about 20 minutes each and can be found on the Holliston Cable Access Facebook page and at www.hcattv.org, so you can watch anywhere at any time. So, the candidate of the day, the moment, is Dan Alfred, who is running for Finance Committee. And
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Good. So
Thanks
it's four candidates for 3 slots.
4 candidates for 3 slots. So
okay.
There's one loser.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Dan. So you are an incumbent. We should be clear about that. How long have you served?
7 years. So I was appointed at first in 2012.
Okay.
Served 6 months or so before running for election, and now my second full term, finishing my second full term.
Okay. So how long have you lived here?
Since 2011, so 8 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, wow. You jumped right in,
Very,
didn't you?
very new to town, yeah.
Yeah, but you jumped right in.
I did. Well, it was an interesting time when I first came here because in 2012 they were actually looking for 3 members. There had been a lot of turnover on the board. There was some unfortunate news about one individual, and so there were 3 members, and I applied and was one of the ones that was selected to.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, including your professional background.
Sure. So I am in the financial services business. I work for one of the larger regional banks in New England and sort of in the Northeast in general, where I invest in the loans that companies issue to help fund mergers and acquisitions and leverage buyouts and things like that. So if you are invested in a floating rate fixed income fund, those are the type of loans that I invest in for our balance sheet. Okay.
And what else is there to say about you?
So I have my MBA as well as my Chartered Financial Analyst designation, so CFA charter, and I've been in financial services for about 16 years.
Okay. Family?
I have 2 young daughters who are in the school system, 8 and almost 6. And a wonderful wife who, also in full disclosure, is on the library board of trustees.
Okay. All right. So why are you interested in being on this board again?
Well, the Finance Committee actually does a very important job in town. I mean, as I'm sure you know, in helping set the budget, in helping guide the town and keep us fiscally sound, and in ensuring that we're helping sort of guide us into investing in the town's future in areas that we view as important. And I think that's a very important goal, and I think it's something that where, given my background, I can bring a lot of expertise in finance and financial matters, and helping, whether it's how we fund a different project that we're doing, through just the town's general revenues. If we consider doing some sort of debt exclusion override, if we can fund it through short-term debt, but still doesn't need to actually be, we could do that through still our own budget, but because of because of lower interest rates, we can actually fund it cheaper that way. That's sort of my expertise.
Okay. Let's talk about the specific skills. Now, I understand that you have the skills, or the experience, rather, in terms of the your work, but what are those specific skills? It's not just that you can add.
I can, though.
Okay. Okay. Do you use a calculator?
Yes, exclusively. But I mean, just being able to look at a sort of a set of numbers and see how the numbers are fitting together and playing, and even before kind of knowing the final number that we have, kind of getting an idea and a sense of how much. We never have excess, right? Because any theoretical excess at the end of the sort of period is actually taxpayer money. So if we don't spend it, it just doesn't get raised through taxes. So we take it very seriously if we do see money that we have at the bottom of our spreadsheet at the end of the day. But understanding sort of where we are and what we can and can't afford, or through the general 2.5% increase in property taxes a year, allows me to start thinking ahead of where sort of we may be, and working with other committees that have asked for more, with whether they can increase, whether they can decrease what they're requesting, or if we may not be able to fund the entire thing.
Okay. All of you are experienced veterans.
Yes.
Okay. So we can't differentiate among you that way.
Sure.
So what do you bring to this position that the others do not?
Certainly, I'm not sure about one of the other candidates, but I know that two of them don't have younger children in the schools, and I think that being newer to town and having younger children brings a unique perspective. There's a lot to be done in town that will impact my children over the next 20 years or so, and that may or may not be, on the forefront, I guess, of some of the other candidates' minds. So I think that, investing in our schools is very important to me. Coming up with a sustainable school budget is also very important to me, as well as, generally speaking, just maintaining all of our existing services. There are a lot of buildings in town that need a lot of work, and, those are going to be what's really going to be around in the future for the next generation. And trying to, so I think it's a different perspective.
From your perspective, what are the top 3 most important functions of this board?
The number one important thing that we do each year is setting the budget guideline. Generally speaking, that's been about 1.5% increase, and that's set from a whole number of different perspectives. But it's based on the 2.5% increase that we can do for property taxes each year, on top of which what we sort of expect from the state. Then, in addition to generally healthcare and other kind of Medicaid are rising faster than that, so that sort of subtracts from that, and setting that and setting the overall tone. Next would be making the actual recommendations after we've reviewed all of the budgets, selecting which projects we believe we can afford and we view as the most important. And then third would be adhering to sound fiscal policy. So there are times when there may be more budgets that we would like to approve higher numbers for, but that just can't be funded through the normal course of operations. There are ways in theory that we could fund those, but they wouldn't necessarily be the most sound, fiscally prudent ways of doing it. And I'm not even talking about an override or anything. I'm just simply meaning using other sort of rainy day type funds in town theoretically would be possible, but wouldn't be the most sound and fiscally prudent. So it's important to sort of be stringent in how you go about those recommendations. So those are the 3 things.
Okay. What is the top change, improvement, or service that you want to see in place at the Finance Committee by the end of your next term, should you be elected?
One of the things I'd really like to see the town do is hire a chief financial officer. I think our town financial staff is great, and they do a phenomenal job, but they're each sort of tasked with their own departments and have their own sort of purview, and there's not a full-time person. The town is growing, right? Our budget constantly is getting larger. Our town is growing with more people as more developments come into town, and I think it's time that we hire a professional to oversee the entire town's budget. And now this is complicated because a huge percentage of the budget is obviously coming from the schools, and so we would have to work with the schools to do this. But hiring a CFO who, obviously because of town meeting and the way decisions are made in town, wouldn't have autonomous ability to sort of make decisions, but someone who's sitting on top of all the budgets and looking at everything constantly on a day-to-day basis, I think would help the town administrator offload some of his responsibilities so that he can go and do more of the sort of core town administrative functions, and would also then give us a better picture of where everything sat in town. And maybe he could come to us with some recommendations on how we could move different resources around to be more fiscally efficient.
I'm going to push back a little bit. Back in the day when Paul LeBeau was here as town administrator, do you think he was functioning as a chief financial officer?
I think Paul's skill set was one that allowed him to do a phenomenal amount that we may not have realized exactly everything that he did at the time. I mean, some certainly did, but I think that he was a unique individual that was able to basically give us a town administrator and a CFO in one. And I'm not entirely sure that our current town administrator is as broad in the scope of what is his strengths as Paul was. Not a knock on him at all. But just simply saying that some individuals are more adept and inclined to do certain functions, and I think that in this case, and I don't actually think that the town administrator's job is actually supposed to be a CFO either. I think in Paul we had sort of just a gem that we luckily had for as long as we had before he retired, but you can't count on that. And he also didn't have any purview over the schools. And I'm not suggesting that we try to take, I don't want anyone's alarm bells to go off here, but I think that having some formal, informal type of relationship with the schools where you did have some individuals sort of sitting on overlooking everything would be very beneficial to the town.
Okay. What's your your personal vision for what Holliston will look like, feel like 5 years from now? Could be 10 years, 5 to 10. And what role does the FinCom play in that?
Well, I want to take a step back a little bit, and talk about sort of my role, my thought on the role of the FinCom.
Sure.
I mean, to me, the FinCom is not an executive board. Our job is not to, to sort of propose and implement huge new policies and different ways of the direction for the town. We certainly have our views as citizens and as individuals, but we're there more to advise and consent on financial matters. Now, that being said, we obviously all have, I mean, the CFO thing is obviously something that would be a selectman type of initiative if it was ever taken up. But I think it's important to realize at the end of the day, the town, the Finance Committee is more of an advisor and consent board. That being said, I hope that in 10 years, the town has an improved high school. I don't know if that's a new school or a sort of a rebuild. I think we need a lot of new buildings in town, including a library. And there are ways of a community center / senior center. I mean, so I'd like to see some real investment in our town plant, if you will. And I'd like to continue to see us grow and attract new families, while also working as hard as we can to remain affordable for the seniors. I think that as taxes have gone up, and they will obviously always continue to go up, it has been tough on those who are on fixed budgets. And there are ways that we can, and we're working on them now, on ways to mitigate some of those increases to those who are unable to pay them, so that they don't have to be forced to move out of town. So that's very important. So as we continue to invest, we can't forget those that have been paying taxes for 40 or 50 years. It shouldn't be that they're pushed out of town, because again, your senior citizens are your history and your legacy, and it should be important to maintain that as long as possible.
Okay. The common opinion in Holliston is that we're a popular community because of our schools, for people who are buying homes and that kind of stuff. This is, in some people's opinion anyway, is why our property values are high. Do you share that perspective, or do you look at it a little differently? How important are the schools to our future, basically?
Well, I mean, look, the schools, importance of schools in general for our future is paramount, right? As a father of two younger children, I mean, kids are sort of our future. It's corny, it's true, but it's always true. I do think, though, that we are at a crossroads right now in how we're investing in our schools. And we're investing in the schools, but we're investing a lot, and there are significant contractual obligations that come up. And I would like to work to try to make sure that we can afford to invest in the schools and invest in additional resources in the schools that our kids need, and which at times is hindered by other large costs. And what I mean by that is we were fortunate this year to at least be able to go to town meeting with the recommendation to hire 2 additional mental health type professionals in the schools, one at the high school and one district-wide. I'm sure everyone has seen in the papers, just the rise in mental health issues at students, as there's more stress to get into college, just more stress in general throughout their entire school career. I find that at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of extra money when all sort of the things that need to be paid for are paid for. And so, that does concern me a little bit, and one of the things that I'd like to work on.
How would you do that?
Well, it's tough, because there are, contractual obligations, again, that are...
All right, so you're basically saying the cost for personnel,
yes,
no matter how you slice it, okay, is too heavy or too big a share of what we're...
I'm saying the annual increases. I'm not making a statement of where we are now. We've been able to afford, and we can afford. And this is not in the Finance Committee's purview. We are not on any kind of negotiating boards and it's not just. And to be clear, it's not just at the schools. There are other bargaining units in town that I think have negotiated contracts that make it difficult for the town. And it's also not to say that I think that the contracts are unfair. But what they do is they do absorb a unsustainable portion of our annual increases each year. And so I think as a town, we need to have a real conversation about what we want going forward. Do we want these increases to be smaller each year and live within Prop 2.5? Do we want to negotiate, to have larger increases and then still have more money, but recognize that we're going to need overrides every number of years? And look, I understand override is the longest four-letter word, but I think that part of the vision for Holliston going forward is we need to have a real sort of soul searching within a community, because we are one of the we're in a tough spot as a community in that we have very little business and commercial and industrial revenue. So 89% of the tax burden is on the townspeople. And I mean, there's no doubt about it. That's a very tough position to be in, because you can't. There's no way of sort of slicing it where you can get more money from businesses, or you can attract more business. There's not just a lot of business space in town. So no one takes a potential override or anything more seriously, than I do. But the facts are, at the end of the day, we're left with basically, after opening the doors for the schools like we did last year and full sort of level service funding it, we were left with the ability to only recommend to town meeting that we appropriate $100,000 more, and that's with not a ton of extra stuff going anywhere else, right? So it's a tough spot.
It is, and obviously it's a much bigger discussion than this show right now, but then you have to be looking, I assume, at what other communities are doing, so that you don't end up being the ones who aren't paying at whatever the current rate is.
And just to be clear to everyone, I'm not here recommending one course of action or another.
It's big.
My wife is a teacher, for instance, and I think that they are some of the hardest working professionals in the world. I mean, they deal with an absolute.
I wouldn't do it.
But at the same time, over the last few years, we've reduced the number of teacher aides in the classroom because we haven't had the money to fund them.
Right.
We don't necessarily have as many mental health professionals as we need in the town, which is putting more burden back on the teachers. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we need to, supporting the teachers. I don't think just means strong, solid pay raises. It can mean other things as well, or it can mean the town says, we want to do, we want to be very competitive, maybe over above 50% to comparable districts. But that the town says, this is so important to us that we want to recommend an override every few years. So I don't know the right answer to it. I just know that it's manifesting itself as being an issue that we need to address.
What are you most proud of from your tenure on the board?
Getting when I joined the board had started setting aside additional money from what is called free cash. It's not free in any way. It's taxpayer money, but it's money that just is not used every year for one reason or another. If somebody leaves halfway through the year and we don't replace them for 3 months, that salary isn't spent, and therefore that sort of drops into free cash. So it's unanticipated monies that we get from one reason, for one source or another. So we've been able to be very diligent and set that money aside in the capital expenditure fund, as well as the town sustainability fund, which is sort of the rainy day fund.
Mm-hmm. I think you mean stabilization.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, the sustainability coordinator has been a big issue.
I know.
Yes, and so getting our sort of fiscal house back in order after sort of the 08-09 recession.
Okay.
Helping with that, because the committee was already on the way to doing that.
What is your biggest regret? Is there anything you want to do over on?
No, I mean, I think that we've been pretty consistent in how we've worked on that. Yeah. So.
Okay, I'm going to give you a minute that you can just, or whatever. You don't have to take a minute, and you can just do a final pitch for yourself. Why should I vote for you?
Look, I see a lot of great potential for Holliston, and I want to help us get there. There are a lot of issues in town that I know are controversial, and I've certainly been on the losing end of some of those at the town meeting and in other areas. But at the end of the day, I want what's best for our town. and I want the best for what's best for my children, which means which I hope means is best for your children. And if you don't have children in the schools, what is also best for you as a taxpayer. I'm not looking to spend every dollar that we get, but I'm looking to spend every dollar that we do spend appropriately. And if I'm reelected and I have your vote, I would look to continue doing that in the future. So thank you.
Well done. Well done. And there we are, at just right on time. This is amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Dan Alfred. Okay, so now that the candidates have shared their views, please be sure to do your part and vote on May 21st at the high school field house between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Turnout for the town election in 2017 was 11%, just 1,100 voters. In 2018, it was 16%. We'd like to beat that this year and hit 20% or more. There are also 2 questions on the ballot about retail marijuana to bring town bylaws into line with the latest state regulations. Local government hits you at home and is where you have the biggest influence, and Holliston is the living model of true democracy. Please participate. Thank you.